Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins. Welcome to Financial Lovemaking, where we talk about love, life, money, and everything in between. I'm here with my buddy, partner, and co-host, the Ebony Magazine Entertainment Director, Miss S. Tia Brown. How you doing today, Tia?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing really well. And today we were going to talk about this article written by Reed, the Relationship Guide on idatedaily.com. That's iDateDaily, iDateDaily,
Yeah.
three words.
And
Uh,
read,
it,
REE, the
REE, the
REE.
relationship. I know, right? That's funny,
I
right? That's
thoroughly
funny. Yeah,
yeah.
keeping it real. Yeah, so real. Read the relationship guide. Wrote an article basically where she gives three ways to know that your relationship is holding you back. I thought that was pretty
Right.
interesting. That's an interesting topic because I think it's important to understand that because people forget that a relationship is a merger, just like two businesses merging together. And if
That's right.
you take a bad business and mix it with a good one, it's not going to be a good move for the good business, right? Or if you mix hot water with cold water, you're going to get warm water. If you know, right? I think that that's important, right? Because a lot of us, why do people choose to be with the person that they're with? I mean, it varies, but a lot of people choose maybe based on what somebody looks like, maybe how much money they make, or things like
Yeah,
that.
super things.
Yeah, but they don't think about that synergy, right? Like,
Or sometimes people have, I think, chemistry initially where it might be a great conversation or physically you have like that lust factor that you're describing as chemistry and you don't look beyond that initial spark. See if you have both the feeling and what I like to call the function to make a relationship not just work but grow.
yeah. I think chemistry can. It's a simple idea, but it's a complex phenomenon. A simple idea, but it should be a complex phenomenon with a complex idea, right? Right? Because there are all different kinds of compatibility, and you and I always talk about how people don't consider financial compatibility
Absolutely.
when it comes to relationships. They'll talk about sexual compatibility, maybe spiritual compatibility, sometimes maybe even professional compatibility, but they won't really talk about things like financial compatibility. And I can say that Ree actually starts off talking about something that is related to financial compatibility. She says
Absolutely.
the number one way to know if your relationship is holding you back is if your career goals are completely opposite. Now she says completely opposite, but I would almost say that it doesn't even have to be opposite. It would have to be a case where you want to go north and they really want to either pull you south or they want to hold you still. I
Right.
think about this because I do know one woman who has a doctorate, and she is stuck in one state because her husband is wants to be in that city that they live in and doesn't want to live anywhere else. Because I asked her, I said, "Well, there are so many jobs in your field all over the country. Why don't you go, look around?" Because being a PhD looking for a job is not like being a mailman or a carpenter looking for a job. I mean, it's more like being an NFL athlete.
It
You know,
really is.
yeah,
Great analogy.
if you
You
played for
go
the
wherever you're called.
yeah, if you play for the Dallas Cowboys, you can't say, "Well, I live in Tinyville, Oklahoma, and I want to stay in Tinyville, Oklahoma. I'm going to look for a job as a football player in Tinyville, Oklahoma." If
Mhm.
there's no professional franchise there, you're not going to find a job. So, I saw that frustration, and I was younger when she told me this, and I learned something from that, and I said, okay, if I get a PhD, I need to be in a situation where I can be flexible. So that might be one example. What do you think?
I absolutely agree, and I don't always think it has to be for jobs or your career as where it is currently, right? Because if you're a PhD, you already know that you might have to move states, but sometimes your ambition grows, right? So you might have a job where, let's say, you start off as a paralegal and you decide that you want to become a lawyer. That may require going back to law school, and all of the different things that come with that. So you really want to be with someone who has the ability to grow with you. So not just, for here and now, but looking forward, because you see that with a lot of couples. Like, you started off in the same place and you're not growing at the same time. And that creates a major issue. So you want someone with that kind of flexibility in thinking.
I think that's a good point. It makes me think about my own parents, who I celebrate them because they're actually having their 40th wedding anniversary next month, and I wish everybody could have seen this marriage happen from inception to where we are today, because I've seen them go through so many ups and downs. I've seen them change so much. I remember when my parents were like 24 years old or 23 years old, even younger than that, and I've seen them grow up together. I've seen them change and have to deal with the fact that they weren't always changing at the same time. And the key factor that I observed was this sort of almost infinite degree of flexibility,
Right.
where if they picked a battle, it was because it was really important to them. I rarely saw sort of this rigidness that says, I'm not going to allow you to do that. Or if you do that, I'm going to divorce you. It was more like, well, your mama wants to do this, so we got to do it. Or yeah, well, it's important to your daddy, so we have to do this. And I learned that kind of respect. Just kind of by observing that, and I think you're right about that sort of potential for growth and kind of knowing that when you get into that merger, you're not really sort of committing to a specific situation. You're committing to a specific relationship and to a specific person, which means that things are going to change, right?
Right. And I think that the key to that is picking a person because you genuinely love them, not what they have, what they look like, or what they represent. Because when we pick people based on superficial things or perceived security, it's very hard to move with the changes that life brings because what you were attracted to and attached to was the here and now. And that is not guaranteed for life.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I certainly agree with you. Yeah, the here and now is going to be gone in about 5 minutes, right? The second thing she mentions is that your outlook on life is completely different. Now she talks about extrovert personalities and introverts, and I think but I think sometimes different. It seems to me that different outlooks on life can be bothersome if it's something that's important to you. Like if you are an eternal optimist and your mate is an extreme pessimist, that can be tough to negotiate. But if you're extroverted and they're introverted, I think that can almost work sometimes. What do you think?
Sometimes it works if you can complement each other. If you're not trying to reinvent who this person is, but slightly nudge them in ways that help make them stronger and maybe achieve some things that they're saying in private that they want to go to and vice versa. But you can't make them into who you want them to be. I think that when I think about the outlook, I think about major deal breakers. Do you want children? Are you a pessimist or an optimist? Do you believe in financial prosperity? Are you open to change? I think that the outlook on life has to be about core values and not just, little personality quirks. You do have to accept a person, though, for who they are generally and genuinely. I think that one of the biggest things that happens is people look at someone and say, I see all this potential. You have to accept that outlook for where it is and who they are.
Well, I agree with that, and that actually takes us to that third point. You mentioned family and children as kind of being a potential deal breaker, and that's what she says. She says if your views on family are completely different, you're going to have a problem. And she talks about the decision to have children, how many children you're going to have, but then also your closeness with your family. Some people have big, close knit families. Some people are used to kind of wandering and not really having the family sort of be the center of everything they do, and that can cause a conflict, especially if you're merging with someone who has a family that you have trouble spending time with. If you don't,
It's such a huge
can't
deal.
relate to them. Yeah, I think that you have to. In my opinion, I at least my perception of marriage would be that you're marrying the family.
I
So
agree.
you got to get to know the family. You got to make sure you're okay with that, and then not just get to know the family, but even observe how close your partner is to the family. So if you
Primary attachment.
right, so they can have, let's say they have a bunch of ratchet relatives you just wouldn't want to hang around with if there's somebody put a gun to your head. That doesn't mean you necessarily write the person off, because if the person it puts that into the proper context and says, okay, you know what, I have a brother who is addicted to drugs, but you can tell that she's not going to go and try to save him every time he gets in trouble or loan him family resources so he can go buy more crack. That might be a reason to kind of say, okay, well, maybe this person is able to cope with what's around them and doesn't allow that to interfere with whatever they're trying to do. You see what I mean? I think that's important.
You don't want to punish a person for who their family is, but you want to be very attentive and intuitive about what that means for the building blocks of this person's personality and their coping skills, right? So you might see a family that is fighting a lot, but you may also see a family that isn't very emotionally connected, not supportive, not affectionate. And all of these things, regardless of whether a person has said, I've worked on this and I'm trying to change, or I like this or I don't like this, have been part of how that individual was raised. So you have to understand the potential for these things to come out in crisis or during times of stress. or as you get to know them more deeply just over time. Because a lot of times, when we're dating someone for the first few months, even year, we still get their representative, as Chris Rock likes to say. And so these things are like the underlying issues or layers that are in that person. So I think that's really one of the big things that you see when you're interacting with family.
Yeah.
Very important to meet parents, extended relatives, even close friends, because the people that you choose to have around you say a lot about your perspective on life and your values.
Yeah, I agree. And I think really going to the core of Ree's question, and I encourage people to look at the article on idatedaily.com. The core of that question is, how do you know if a relationship's holding you back? And I think most of us know what it feels like to be held back, and it means different things to different people, right? For some people, maybe it may mean being held back sexually. It may mean being held back financially. It may mean being held back geographically. But I think that for yourself, if you know what your trajectory is, what matters to you and what direction you're seeking to go, how hard you're seeking to go in that direction, then you have to really sort of, I think, honestly assess, okay, what's it going to be like sort of co-living with this other person and having to take them into account when I make all of these decisions. And I would argue that if you're making major life moves, like you're going to move across the country to go to graduate school in the next year or two, it may make sense to take your time and pick a mate after you move, as opposed to meeting somebody in New York and saying, hey, I'm going to LA, why don't you move with me, right? Because I would argue that if you're making major adjustments in your life, that may not be the time for you to settle down, get married, have kids, all that stuff. It may, you may want to put that on hold for a while. What do you think?
I agree. I think there are two great ways to say this relationship is holding me back. Number one, is it changing the way that you're behaving? Are you acting differently? Are you nervous about things that you would normally talk to a partner about, even talk to friends about? Are you thinking and behaving differently? And the other thing is, are you dreaming differently? A lot of times people want us to be smaller or maybe even bigger. Sometimes people try to push you too much out of your comfort zone. If a relationship is changing the way you're behaving or thinking and dreaming, it is a relationship that's holding you back from being your best self.
That's, I was going to shut it down, but I have to tell a personal story on this because I think what you say is so important. One of the things that I always ran into was, when I started doing my whole Dr. Boyce Watkins thing, whatever that means, when I got my PhD and started doing more public stuff, right, there you go, right. People react, and you probably go through this a lot too, because you're a big wig at Ebony. When people see you on TV and they see you doing big stuff, yeah, there you go, throw your bows. When they see you doing big stuff, they sometimes project something on you. They look at you and they say, oh, this is my ticket, or this person is going to help me get access to a certain kind of life. And my challenge was that, I've never been in this game for the glitz and the glam and the fame and knowing famous people or getting free tickets to concerts or VIP access. And that's just never been me. And so, I remember times where I would meet, sometimes I'd meet a woman who was like, thinking like, okay, this is going to be the life of being with this guy. And it would bother me because I take a lot of risk. Sometimes I'll say things that might be controversial, and I know that things change. You might lose an endorsement deal, or you might suddenly be unpopular for a while. And I felt to myself, if a person isn't strong enough to withstand that, then they probably shouldn't be in my space.
That's right. They're there for the here and now,
right?
Not because they love boys,
right? Or not, or and they don't even have to love me that much. I understand. I mean, people like what they like. I'm kidding about that. But no, but in all seriousness, though, it's not even so much about loving me as a person. It's more so about saying, maybe Can You Stand the Rain, the New Edition song, or maybe just kind of saying, let's not really get so focused on the superficial of what we do.
But that is about loving the essence of who you are, not what you have, not what you represent, because those things are fluid. So I think we're saying the same thing there. And I know you hate when that happens sometimes, but sometimes it does.
I don't agree with you on anything. You're always wrong.
Well, I'm interested in hearing what the viewers have to say about this topic. How do you know if a relationship is holding you back? Write in and let us know. Thank you so much for listening today, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.